Why, hello there. Welcome to Onwards with Dr. Danielle. I am Dr. Danielle Clark, and I am so excited to be with you. This show is live. No worries if you're watching the recording. It's still the same good energy. It's still the same good information. For those of you tuning in live, thank you for being with me. And I invite you to stay after the show as there'll be an opportunity for Q&A and some live mediumship and psychic readings. I am a psychic medium. I am an intuitive life coach, and I am a business professor. And I am here as a part of my life's work to help you heal. If you are feeling stuck from grief, trauma, self-judgment habits, I'm here to pass over some energy, pass over some perspective to help you moving onwards. Today's topic, we're going to be focused on imposter syndrome. I'm here hopefully going to give you some motivation, some new perspective on imposter syndrome so that you don't let it derail your dreams, because yes, it's a heavy feeling. Yes, we just want to hide under a rock when we feel like we're a fraud. However, you're too valuable to be hiding anywhere. So without further ado, let me just get into today's topic, imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? There is a variety of different definitions, and I have a few here I'll read to you. And as I'm talking, I encourage you, if you want to grab your notebook or pen, now might be a good time if you want to just jot down a few notes. But also, no worries if you just want to hang back. In addition to the information I'm giving, it's also an energy transmission to help you be unblocked. So whatever calls to you. So here's a few definitions that might help you expand your understanding of imposter syndrome. This one's by Dr. Susan Albers. It's the feeling that everyone else knows exactly what they're doing, but you feel lost. You have this fear that people around you are going to figure out that you don't know what you're talking about and expose you as a fraud. Now here's my definition. It's a psychological pattern in which we doubt ourselves and our accomplishments, and we have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. It's the idea that success has only found us because of luck, not because of talent, qualifications, and hard work. And here's another definition by Helpline. Imposter syndrome, also called perceived fraudulence, involves feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence that persist despite your education, experience, and accomplishments. So if any of this sounds familiar, you might have a heart block of imposter syndrome, and that's okay because we're going to work on that. And the number one thing to know about imposter syndrome is that many of us experience it at one time or another. Multiple studies have shown, in fact, that approximately 70% of us experience some kind of a feeling of being a fraud or a fake or a phony at some time. And so I share this with you in hopes that it already lightens the load, that it lightens that feeling of, well, I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I'm not smart enough. Because if you realize it's not just you with these feelings, you can release that shame, you can release that fear. It doesn't need to have as much power as you're giving it. This is a topic that's near and dear to me personally, because I have navigated imposter syndrome almost my entire adult life. And I say navigate, I haven't been able to conquer it, but I cope with it and I work with it and I love it and I keep understanding it because it's a piece of me. So a little bit about me. Where do I begin this story? Once upon a time, right, I was an at-risk youth, and I was raised, but not really raised, by a mentally unwell mom who was addicted to painkillers, and an alcoholic dad who didn't live with me for a lot of my childhood. And so there was a lot of trauma based off of that upbringing. I didn't get the love that I needed as a child that I was looking for. But I didn't even realize that I had this trauma until later on in life. I ended up getting kicked out of school for selling my mom's painkillers. And started working full-time at the age of 14 at a sub shop. And it wasn't until I was about 17 that I went for my GED in an effort to get my life back on track. I didn't want to be that kid, but I was that person in a lot of ways. I gave myself physically to men for validation. I gave my money to so-called friends for validation. So all of this later on in life contributed to me overcompensating, showing the world that I wasn't, no longer the troublemaker of my past, that I was smart enough to belong. And so my imposter syndrome was interesting. I didn't realize I had it, but I had this extreme perfectionism. Any work setting, any social setting, I always had to be the best, or I had to be right. If somebody challenged my opinion, if somebody perhaps had a credential better than mine, I would feel like I didn't belong, that they were going to realize I was just faking it, and I'd get anxiety, or I'd overextend myself to prove that I was worthy. And it wasn't until late in my 20s that I discovered this term imposter syndrome, and it put on the lights for me. And I was like, wow, maybe this is what I'm experiencing. So a lot of my imposter syndrome is trauma-based. And so if you're here with me today and you've experienced some sort of a trauma or multiples in your life, some of that feeling of not belonging or not being good enough might contribute to your imposter syndrome. But it's not only trauma that can help seed imposter syndrome. Us females, we are prone to imposter syndrome significantly more than males. Also, vulnerable populations include minorities, and any kind of a person or a group that just feels different than or separate than. So it's really, really important to understand that. And then there's a lot of settings in the workplace that are known to breed imposter syndrome, including academia, which I'm in, as you'll remember from earlier. I'm a business professor. So good news is the more we talk about it, the less hold it has on us. If you want to do some Googling, Taylor Swift just recently had a chat in an interview saying she experienced imposter syndrome. Taylor Swift is a beautifully talented songwriter and musician, and she couldn't find the director she wanted for a video of hers, and so she decided to direct it herself. Now, in my opinion, that's like a shoe-in. She's got so many transferable skills. Of course, she has creativity and a keen sense of detail and time management. She's got everything to direct, but she doubted herself. She kept that negative talk going and saying, maybe I'm not the best person to direct. I don't have a degree to be a director. I don't have this schooling. And what's interesting is in her talking about it is she's quite pleased with her work. So it's a lot of unneeded self-talk. And again, if you want to do some Googling, Tom Hanks, a few years ago, I think this was in preparation for his role in Mr. Rogers, he also admitted to feeling a sense of fraud quite often, even though he's considered, one of America's sweethearts, I think they refer him as. He's come out quite beautifully and candidly that sometimes he just feels like, who am I to be here, right? So we all go through it. We understand that there is vulnerable populations out there. So now let's get to the good stuff, right? Like, how can you make sure that this feeling, this cognitive bias doesn't control you, doesn't stop you? So a few things. One, continue to do exactly what you're doing. The more you talk about it, it normalizes it. You get a nugget here. And anytime you lean into energy, whether you invest time into a book or a podcast or a show like today, you're on a higher level opening up to the fact that you want to know more and you want to heal. So keep that conversation going. There's several things I want to point out as you move on your imposter syndrome journey. And I will say, I don't even like the word syndrome. It sounds goodness, what's the word? Well, you think of the word, but and I'll call it maybe your imposter voice, if you will, because I don't think it's a sickness. It's just something we need to navigate. Nothing should be labeled as good or bad, in my humble opinion. Okay, so one thing that I have used for my imposter voice journey is affirmations. And if you're not familiar with affirmations, they're strong I statements that can bring you into the present and get you out of your head. So a few that I've created for myself, and that can be found on my blog at drdanielleclark.com, is I was born to try new things and to create. Only I decide what success looks and feels like. I'm going to give that to you again. I was born to try new things and to create. Only I decide what success looks and feels like. And so the power of affirmations is using them frequently. You want to up your power and you want to block out those negative thoughts. Here's a few more. I am worthy of all good things. I give myself unconditional love always. Like attracts like. The right people are attracted to my ideas, passions, offerings, and energies. And let me give you that one again, because that has a really nice vibe. Like attracts like. The right people are attracted to my ideas, passions, offerings, and energy. And again, if you go to drdanielleclark.com, every 2 weeks I send out a personal story with a writing prompt and an affirmation focused on helping you to be a higher version of yourself. Okay, so other things that you can do as it relates to your imposter voice. You need to look at the facts. Yes, feelings talk to us and tell us things. We're all intuitive, and it's important to distinguish what is your fear-based voice, your ego, versus what is your intuition. And so sometimes we become really off-kilter with our imposter voice. So look at the facts. If you're feeling like I'm not smart enough to do this, I don't belong, my boss is going to find out that I don't belong and that he or she's going to fire me, like whatever that voice is. So breathe, look at the facts. When was the last one-on-one you had with your boss? How's your performance doing? How does she or he feel that you're living up to the expectations of the role? You might not feel like you're qualified enough, but what classes have you taken, right? What certificates do you have? So look at the facts. That's a nice way to ground you in reality when you're feeling that imposter syndrome. It can also be really helpful to ask people, right? If you're jaded, ask your colleague, Lisa, I'm having some doubts about my performance. What are you seeing from me these last few months? Again, that can be a nice data source, a fact, if you will. Yes, of course, it's one person's opinion, but it gets you outside of your own. So don't forget that. You want to look at the facts. You want to look at metrics and what people have to say. Other things that are really important is to stop and kind of do, I guess I'd call it like a grounding scan. Is your environment leading to your distortion, right? There's some environments that are just so ego-filled, or they're just so I don't know, man's clubby, that you instantly feel like you don't belong, but that's not because you're creating that within yourself. It's because you really don't belong. So maybe it's not imposter syndrome. Maybe it is your body and your mind telling you you don't belong. So really take a pulse on your environment as well. Social media is a great example of like how our environment can make us feel one way. We've all been there. We're having a great day. We feel on top of the world. We feel beautiful. We feel abundant. And then we do like a scroll through Instagram and we're like, my teeth aren't white enough. I'm not having enough fun with my friends. I don't belong, right? So be careful about anything that's distorting you. And so what is helpful is like go to your, safe spot, your coffee shop, your little nook in the house, and just strip yourself away from that culture, that environment, and see how you're feeling and calibrating there. So that'll be really important. Other things to do, just continue. You're here investing time in yourself. So you're already doing the hard work, and I say kudos because it's not easy. But just continue to get to know yourself, lean into yourself, your higher self, because it's just going to naturally quiet your imposter voice. You don't want to spend too long focusing on your imposter voice, because then you're giving it energy that it doesn't deserve. Who are you? This is a great time to get reconnected, possibly with your faith, your meditation practice, maybe some reflective journaling can help. The stronger your connection is with yourself and your soul's purpose and everything you're giving to the world, that imposter voice doesn't have that power. It doesn't have that strength. So that's another really, really good thing to consider for yourself. Other things, you want to speak your truth. If you are in a situation where you're feeling uncertain, that you don't belong, that you don't understand something, that you're not good enough, don't create shame by bottling it in. Speak that, dear boss, can we have a meeting? I'm feeling rocky about this project and I want to express my concerns. That is going to keep you healthy, mind, body, soul, and not feed that imposter voice. So again, if you're feeling left out, if you're feeling like you don't belong, none of this fake it till you make it, just to be honest. You can be vulnerable and confident in the same way. This isn't weakness. This isn't you damaging your reputation. It's you honoring your soul. And again, if someone, especially your boss, isn't liking that you're feeling uncertain at times, or you need a little bit more clarity or care, might not be the best place for you, and that environment might actually be giving you some toxic vibes that are contributing to that imposter voice. Let's see, what else? I would also suggest, this is a tough one, I know, easier said than done here. Move forward regardless. Sometimes we spend so much time fixing or trying to fix or planning or reading, like we don't spend enough time doing, right? And the doing is important. And one way that you can honor your dreams is just move forward, be clunky, right? This is episode 1 for me here today, and I'm sure I've been a little clunky. And that's okay. And truth be told, even before I started this episode, I had a bout of that imposter voice. Like, are people going to listen to me? Who am I to talk about imposter syndrome, right? And so also just realize that you shouldn't judge your thoughts, because it snowballs the effect, right? Okay, yep, I got a little anxiety, and let it pass. Let it pass. Let's see what else. Yeah, good. Okay, we've covered. Yeah, good. We've covered a lot. So I wanted to end the last 10 minutes and get circle back and get a little personal with you, because again, I feel like my story can give you a lot. One story that came to mind before we came together today was, as a business professor, I was teaching an introduction to business course. I've been teaching for years. I have, goodness, four business degrees, tons of certificates. I've done the corporate America thing. I had a student come up to me and he said, Dr. Clark, can we meet? And I said, sure. And when we ended up meeting, he says, I'm not learning anything in your class. And the second he said that, I couldn't breathe. I could not breathe. And all I thought, that my first reaction was, he knows I don't belong here and I need to leave teaching. That was my first reaction. It was physical, it was mental. And it's going to happen. And in that moment, it was hard to get myself centered. I realized that I was clouded, and so I breathed into it, and I asked him what his concerns were with the class. And I knew the conversation wasn't for me at that time because I wasn't my best me. And so I got a little information and just asked if we could circle back so I could have time processing the information. And that worked beautifully because after a few hours, and yes, it took a few hours, there's no like magic pixie dust here, I was able, with my affirmations, with the remembering the facts, my credentials, right? With some self-love, just going for a walk and paying attention to me, remembering who I was. And just because one person wasn't connecting with the class or the way I was teaching doesn't mean that I'm a fraud or a phony. So I hope that that story sticks with you. And then the professor in me wants to give you homework, if you may. So write this down if you want an extra challenge. Because I do hope that you work to apply everything we've talked about today. And here's a few special activities I want you to hold with you. Throughout the next week or so, when you notice either that physical response or that mental response that's not serving you, put up a stop sign in your third eye. Picture it. You can even picture it right now, and just say stop. Like I don't need you right now. Energetically, that does us well to put up that boundary, if you will. And so the more you practice that, and you don't let the negative self-talk or you don't let the negative emotions stay for too long, the easier it will be to move on. So I want you to picture that stop sign. And I also want you to start giving yourself green go signs. So if you are in the meeting and you do want to raise your hand because you have a good idea, but you're also worried that you're going to sound silly because you're new and you don't know what you're talking about, I want you to put the green sign up in your third eye, and I want you to go for it. And I use these signs all the time, and they really help give me an energetic boost and I don't know, the power to move forward. So I did ask for questions before we started this episode today, because I was curious what people had on their minds, and there was a lot of questions. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to any of them, but I do want to get to a few. So I'm going to say thank you ahead of time to Sally. Sally, you wrote to me and you said, do you think imposter syndrome gets better or worse as we get older? Great question. And I'm going to say, the decision's yours. I would imagine it gets progressively worse if you don't do the hard work like we've talked about today, if you don't break these judgment habits, if you don't lean in to the dark side and the light side of who you are. So I would imagine, you know, picture this. You hold something in your hand and you're like, nope, not heavy at all, not heavy at all. But like if you're holding it for an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours, it gets really heavy. And I think that's the same with imposter syndrome, where if you don't do the hard work, it's going to get harder. But if you do the hard work, then as you age and grow, you're not going to have to do as much of that work. So good question there. Okay, let's see. Cindy. Why aren't I hearing more about imposter syndrome at work, for an example? Great question. I actually did a talk on imposter syndrome last week at an organization, and I was so happy they reached out to me. I do feel as though we are starting to hear a little bit more about it, especially with the pandemic and the heightened focus on mental health awareness. However, I also think it's one of those things that it takes vulnerability to talk about, and a lot of organizations, especially those that have an old school masculine culture, they don't want us to talk feelings. They don't want us to show any kind of weakness. So I think that's why. But again, I'm excited to share with you. I'm starting to see a shift, and there's more interest in this conversation. And if it's not happening in your workplace, maybe this is the spark for you to go ahead and be like, hey, I'd like to invite a speaker in, or I'd like to share a TED Talk about imposter syndrome, or I'd like to start a monthly group meeting where we can talk about our imposter syndrome. So sky is the limit for you. Good. Okay, we'll do one more. Okay, this one's anonymous. I am overweight. Do you think that has an impact on imposter syndrome? Interesting. I would say perhaps. I don't think being overweight directly connects to imposter syndrome. However, if you're not feeling like your best you, or if you're feeling like you're already being judged for your weight, like if that being overweight isn't sitting well with you, then I absolutely think you already have a shaky foundation. And with the shaky foundation, of course, then when you're doubting other parts of you, maybe your intellect, for an example, it just heightens it. So, the message there is it's all connected, right? Mind, body, soul, mind, body, soul. We hear that all the time. So I'd encourage you, just give yourself love in all areas, and you should start to naturally see progress with the imposter voice too. Okay, good stuff. Well, remember, I'm hanging out for a live Q&A session. It would be an honor to have you with me if you have direct questions about imposter syndrome. I can also link in from a psychic perspective, or even maybe connect with one of your departed loved ones in spirit. They might be able to give a little bit more perspective on that imposter voice, ways in which that you can heal. I'd love to offer that to you. Next episode is entitled Hurt People, Hurt People. Yes, I know, a tongue twister, but it's true. Hurt people, hurt people. And hurt people, the people can be us too. The hurt people can hurt people. So we're going to talk self-sabotage. We're going to talk about why others hurt others, and how we can cope and heal with that hard reality. We're going to talk a little bit about boundary setting as well. And yeah, we'll have a good time. With that being said, I want to remind you that it is the cracks in your heart that let the light shine in. And I'll leave you with a few extra words of love, because I'm called to. You're worthy. You're beautiful. You're unique, you're kind, and you kick ass. All right, my dears, I will see you if you're going to tune in live next week. It is Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'd love to be in your energy. All right, be well. Take care.